Interactive movies have been tried and failed miserably.
And he's coming exclusively to theaters equipped with Interfilm's revolutionary interactive button control system, where you, the audience, choose every step of his adventure.
On the other hand, video games have gotten far more cinematic as the years have gone by.
Pirati believe always that war is psychological.
These two observations bring to light one interesting fact. An interactive movie necessitates audience control and participation in how things unfold. But as a movie is a beginning-to-end story, this does not mesh very well with the venue. Video games, on the other hand, necessitate the very things filmmakers were looking for when trying to invent the interactive movie. It has reached a point where those in the entertainment industry have learned that if there is ever to be a truly interactive movie, it will have to come in video game form. Others have tried their hand at the project, but always seemed to create a product that was far more video game than film, with the story being largely at service of the gameplay. Sony and Quantic Dream attempt to be the pioneers in what is said to be not merely a video game with movie-like qualities, not merely a movie with video game-like qualities, but rather a movie-video game hybrid. The result is Heavy Rain, the first truly interactive movie. The aims here are lofty, the results are mixed. As you could probably already guess, this review will be quite different than my usual. In judging Heavy Rain, I am forced to look at two aspects of one goal. How much of this game works well as a movie, how much of it works well as a video game, and do the two combine to form a satisfying experience in both categories? This will be quite challenging for me, as my judgment must be extended to two distinctly different aims, that of engaging people in a movie, but also a game. It is a strain on my usual sensibilities, but one that I am delighted to take on. When I first heard about this game, I knew that I would eventually review it, because not only is this a fascinating idea, but the question of whether or not the interactive movie is even viable might just be decided with this very game. So in this review, we will explore qualities tailored to a movie and those tailored to a video game, judging the characters, the story, the gameplay, and the replay value or rewatchable value in all of these areas. And by the end, we will hopefully have some idea as to whether or not this is the next big thing in interactive entertainment, or just the next biggest fad. If there is a main character in the game, it is surely Ethan Mars. While the game shifts you around to various perspectives, his story is central and threads through just about every aspect of the game. Ethan is a loving father of two boys, Jason and Sean. The majority of the opening is spent establishing his devotion as a father and his love for his children. But tragically, he loses Jason in a freak accident, and the character takes a turn from then on. Ethan remains a loving father to Sean, but he is haunted by nightmares and blackouts. His ability to relate to his remaining son will vary depending on how you play the character, but you always get the sense that his actions towards Sean, either positive or negative, are due to the repercussions of their loss of Jason. The character remains relatively consistent throughout. Madison Paige, on the other hand, is a different matter. From her first scene, I was of the opinion that taking on the character of Lauren would have been much more interesting than playing Madison Paige, as I found Lauren to be a much more interesting person. But sadly, she is only a non-playable sidekick in the game. Sadly, we are stuck with Paige. The woman offers very little to the story or to the game, mainly taking up space as the female love interest for Ethan and throwing a few curveballs into the plot. Rarely will she do anything of real importance until the tail end of the game. Madison is a vacuum with a stock personality and supposed batitude, though that can only be determined through her various props, such as a motorcycle she drives and her wayward behavior of sleeping in various random hotels. In addition to the character problems is the fact that she seems to be tacked on as a somewhat immature diversion and filler. Sometimes it feels as though the game designers are simply taking advantage of the fact that you get to control a girl. One wonders how much adolescent snickering went into the construction of some of these scenes. Then we have Norman Jayden, who is an FBI profiler helping the feds and the police in attempting to solve a series of murders. Jayden is by far the character who exudes the most personality of the four, with the occasional wisecrack and an entertaining observation here and there. Norman comes equipped with a cool virtual reality gadget, but you can only use it in certain confined portions of the game, and sadly those limit you to using it to perform mundane tasks like sifting through the case information or occasionally changing the look of your office. Just imagine how cool it would have been if you could change your locales at will or play his wall and ball game whenever you felt like it. Finally, we have Scott Shelby, who comes across as almost instantly lovable. Seasoned and kind, this is the guy who you would want on your side for either getting into a scrape or to provide emotional support. He is an instant father figure. All four characters, while varying in depth, are very distinct in their own personalities, but there is both a benefit and a drawback to this. While the game definitely gives you a rudimentary power of choice, there is no question but that you are playing pre-written characters, and some of the decisions you are offered simply don't seem organic to their natures. At one point in the game, you have the choice as Scott Shelby to either help Lauren or walk away, but I felt a very pressing need to come to her rescue because I felt that's what the character would do. Clearly there are some issues here, and while the multiple choices can help vary and enhance the gameplay experience, it comes at the price of a character and story consistency. As characters in a movie, these four would have been a pretty standard range from poor to fine to pretty good. But as video game characters, a few different advantages crop up, as well as a few new problems. One of the most interesting characters in the game is also one that goes unseen. The Origami Killer takes on a life of his own as all four characters attempt to track him down and identify him in their own ways. The killer abducts exclusively young boys, only during the rainy season, after which their bodies are found several days later in a remote location. The boys are always drowned, and an origami animal figure is placed in their hands and an orchid placed on their chest. And unfortunately for Ethan Mars, his remaining son Sean may be the killer's next victim. Ethan Mars is by far the best of the four, because he is the one with the most to lose. The question surrounding his character is exactly how far he will go to save his son's life. Every time Ethan must make a decision, the moment of Jason's loss is always looming in the background, and the opening of the game did an excellent job of making that so. We have an extra motivation to try and save Sean, because we already know what a tragedy it is to lose one son to begin with. The game makers make our wanting Ethan to succeed a very natural reaction, and virtually no matter what he's doing, Ethan is an engaging character to play. As I said earlier, you really achieve nothing by playing Madison Paige, aside from being kidnapped from time to time in the usual Scooby-Doo-like fashion, or enjoying the frivolous privilege of making her shake her various groove things in your face from time to time. Frankly, I was so put off by this character that I don't even want to spend too much time on her in this review. And if you think I'm being unfair here, then I direct your attention to this. All of the characters in the game have the exact same voice actor and body double, except Madison Paige. The game makers chose to use one person for her voice and facial likeness, and another person to make up her body. And by an amazing coincidence, the woman who provides the model for the character's body also happens to be a professional model. Now, to be fair, the professional model was cast first, but it's clear to see what they had in mind for this character from the beginning. The motivations behind her presence are obvious, frivolous, and to be honest, I was actually a little offended by it. And that's coming from me, people. Norman Jayden is the second best character in the game, with a nonchalant attitude and the only character with a quasi-sci-fi angle. The AR eyeglasses aren't just for show, they give him a set of personal demons that will have to be dealt with as the story unfolds. While we aren't given much backstory as to where the AR eyeglasses come from or how they work, we do know that the wearer can become physically and psychologically dependent on them. How Jayden will deal with this addiction will be up to you to a certain extent, but the element gives the character a unique obstacle to overcome no matter how you decide to play him. There is one drawback to playing Jaden, however, and that is that some of the time, playing him will feel like a waste of your time. Jaden is an FBI profiler who uses his knowledge of people to try and track down the Origami Killer. However, you as the player don't do any real investigating or profiling when playing Norman Jaden. You will have the opportunity to enter a virtual file system and look over various pieces of information, but there is no way for the player to pick and choose which information is relevant or what lead to track down next. These sequences simply unlock different scripted parts in the game and allow you to progress further. This makes the statement that you are playing an FBI profiler almost rhetorical, and these time-consuming scenes would have worked just as well as standard cutscenes. Finally, Scott Shelby would have been the second best character in the game had it not been for the way the game ends. Playing him as a character just feels right. You really do feel like a gumshoe brawler roughing up bad guys and lending a touch of father figure support to Lauren. Shelby was definitely a standout character, but then you reach the big reveal later in the game, and it all quickly falls apart. It is a hell of a thing trying to review the story for this game, as your decisions will lead you around many different corners, to the point where it can almost be hard to tell if you and a friend were even playing the same game. So what I've decided to do is to analyze the aspects of this story that are universal in character. I will review the overstory, regardless of the different variations that can be experienced while playing it. In looking at the game this way, I came to realize that as a story, only two threads are really important: the story of Ethan Mars and the story of the Origami Killer. These two stories could easily have been taken out of the game, transplanted to a screenplay, and made for a real film. And a pretty damn good one at that. So it's these two particular stories that I have chosen as the focus of this part of the review. The rest of the side stories involving the remainder of the characters will be analyzed in the gameplay section. The Origami Killer has kidnapped Ethan's son and placed him in a drain that slowly fills with rainwater, giving Ethan until the water reaches the top to save his son's life. This makes the ticking clock out of a true act of nature, which is something that I found to be very interesting. There are 4 tasks Ethan must complete in order to save his son Sean, and each task is tailored to a specific reaction the killer is looking for. Ethan must show courage to save his son by driving the wrong way on a freeway for 5 full minutes. He must suffer to save his son by crawling through a narrow corridor filled with shards of broken glass and navigating through open electrical wires. He must make a sacrifice to save his son by cutting off part of one of his fingers, and finally he must kill to save his son. That one should be pretty self-explanatory. As the story takes Ethan through these tasks, you begin to realize that the killer has just as much of an interest in what Ethan is doing to save his son than he is to killing his son in the first place. Maybe more. But the question is, why? Is this just a sick game for him, or is there something more complicated going on here? The killer's psychology is practically mapped out through every step of the story, and it makes the want for a final reveal all the more prominent. As Ethan is tasked with these objectives, the feds are eventually led to believe that Ethan is the Origami Killer, and that he is suffering from a kind of multiple personality disorder. The idea is that when he blacks out, an alter ego takes control and kidnapped his son in order to test Ethan's own loyalty to his son. This means that in addition to completing the tasks, he must also work to stay free and avoid the law in order to save his son Sean. The other characters will aid him in these things either directly or indirectly. Jaden never believes for a second that Ethan is the Origami Killer, as he doesn't fit the psychological profile, but his edgy partner is determined to bring him in. Madison, to be fair, does lend her support to Ethan in trying to keep him away from the cops. Only Shelby is absent from Ethan's direct actions as he works in the background to find the Origami Killer before saving Sean even becomes an issue. In the game, this can all be resolved in a variety of ways, but as far as the story goes, the conclusion regarding the killer remains consistent. At one point, we get a flashback scene explaining everything. When the Origami Killer was little, he had a twin brother and a deadbeat father. He and his brother went to play one day when his brother fell in an open pipe and was on the verge of death. Desperate to save his brother, he ran back to tell his father, but the father was too drunk and too hateful of both of them to help. He eventually returns to his twin, who asks him not to forget him, and finally dies. When the origami killer was older, he began kidnapping boys and putting them in similar situations to his brothers so that the fathers would come and rescue them. His goal, therefore, turns out not to kill the children, but rather to find the father that he needed that day. I'm going to go out on a huge limb here, I know, but the origami killer's motivations might just be the most interesting, the most unique, and the most original motivations of any killer in video game or in film. The origami killer is a serial killer who doesn't want his victims to die. On the contrary, he wants them to be saved. He isn't actually looking to hurt or kill anyone. He is looking for the very thing he needed when he was a child. And this is in perfect cross-harmony with Ethan, whose motivations are to be that very father figure to Sean. These two stories culminate into an impressive feat of storytelling. Ethan is, in many ways, the father that the origami killer needed, and the origami killer is essentially the son that Ethan has been trying to save. These are by far the standout aspects of Heavy Rain's story. The origami killer's motivations are fantastic and make all the sense in the world. Who the origami killer turns out to be does not.
Blake is convinced that Mars is the killer.
Not you. I thought there was some evidence to that effect.
That's true. But it just doesn't make sense. His psychological profile doesn't fit.
You know who else didn't fit the profile? Scott Shelby. But that's exactly who the killer turns out to be. Making the killer the person whom you least suspect is a bedrock tradition of the whodunit, but this becomes a serious problem when a player has control over the character's actions. Shelby being the killer is contrary to how I chose to play that character in the game, and as my first run-through was spent trying to make him act the way I honestly thought his character would, this makes it all the more heinous of a reveal. It didn't matter how I chose to play that character, because they were going to make the killer whoever they wanted, whenever they wanted, however they wanted. So what was the point of all that decision making in the first place? Adding to this is the fact that when you start backtracking, you realize that Shelby's role in the game now makes little sense. Essentially, we are to believe that he accompanied Lauren to track down and remove his own evidence. But he could have easily done this on his own without bringing her along, and the only reason she was involved at all is because he went to her in the first place. This is not even the worst part of this reveal. Red herrings are of course expected in a story such as this, but there comes a point in the game where it's just plain cheating you out of a key piece of information. At one point, you as Shelby go with Lauren to a shop to try and track down a lead, and you go about your business in real time in the game. But in the flashback scene, it is revealed that Shelby actually killed the shopkeeper while you, the player, were controlling him. The game did not let you see this when you were in control of Shelby, and so the whole thing was simply a betrayal of the gameplay experience. I don't care if you are writing a book, movie, or video game. If you don't give us a fair chance at figuring it out in a whodunit, you may as well not even bother making it a mystery in the first place. Every part of Shelby being the killer just feels wrong, and once you get to the end of the story and start backtracking about it, all the tiny errors and plot holes start coming out of the woodwork. I have absolutely no idea how Jason died. Not only did Ethan turn him away from the car, but the car itself seemed to be putting along at a brisk 10 miles an hour. And what's worse is that they actually slowed this scene down to make it look more dramatic, which makes it abundantly clear that it would almost be physically impossible for Jason to have died in this way. What was Ethan doing standing outside with an origami figure in the first place? Apparently just to throw the audience off. Little mistakes like this thread through the entire game and slowly erode the story once the game is complete. Like a hunk of Swiss cheese, there is plenty to bite into here. It's simply full of an enormous amount of holes. The gameplay in Heavy Rain is all over the map. By far it stands out the most during fight scenes, escape scenes, and moments where you are running in pursuit of another individual. It is during these moments where it truly feels like the idea of an interactive movie is actually working. If you've ever had a moment in a film where you wanted so badly for a cop to catch a predator or for a damsel in distress to escape her captor that you wish you could jump in yourself and make it happen, you will start to understand what the game makers are trying to do in these moments. These things will either be pulled off or not based on how you play the game. Reaction time and quick reflexes are key, and it is at these moments where I found myself sitting on the edge of my seat or standing while I flung that controller every which way. I will catch this son of a bitch. I am going to get Lauren out of this car. I will make the story end well for everyone whom I control. The game's attempt to be an interactive movie succeeds in these moments at all times, and the interest in where the story is going eventually blends beautifully with these parts of the gameplay. You are not writing this story for them, rather you are working to see how their story ends by playing your way. This is the good news. The bad news is that the tutorial sections in the opening never seem to stop as the game goes on. Quite frankly, there are moments in this game that we simply do not need to watch or do. Filler is no stranger to video games or films, but these moments in the game represent the worst of both worlds. The dialogue also suffers from time to time. Being given the power of choice, you have the option on occasion to respond in different ways to other players, but the game does not always compensate for the changes in dialogue. And some of the characters will repeat the same lines no matter what you say to them, whether those lines make any sense in response or not.
Your vast experience hasn't prevented 8 victims from being murdered. Fucking asshole! I came here to find a killer. And that is exactly what I'm gonna do. With or without your help. Fucking asshole!
However, there is a consistent amount of tension in playing Heavy Rain, and this is due in large part to the fact that your characters can die. The game does not offer you a reset option when this happens. It will continue with the remaining characters in various ways until the game ends, and everyone's story can end differently depending on who makes it through and who doesn't. Consistency errors still persist in this case. For example, Madison will have virtually every character's number on her cell phone at the end of the game, whether she should or not, but the overall experience positively trumps these minor hiccups in the plot. And you will find yourself coming back to Heavy Rain for multiple playthroughs just to see what endings you may have missed the first time around. Motion-controlled gameplay may seem better suited for a Wii game than with the 6-axis controller of the PlayStation, but Heavy Rain's controls actually put you into the game far better than any Wii game I have played to date. Every action you perform on the controller matches the character's actions perfectly, and everything feels right, save for thrusting the controller to the side. In those moments, I had a hard time getting the controller to register my actions. Fortunately, the game now features move support, and while I don't personally own it, the reports have been that these minor problems are fixed with ease. The gameplay may be all over the place, but the strengths it possesses certainly outweigh the shortcomings. You will certainly have your share of filler activities in order to extend the length of the game, but this can be forgiven in light of the moments where Heavy Rain shines. When it drags, but when it works fantastic. The gameplay is absolutely nailed. What is Heavy Rain? Is it a video game wrapped in a movie? Is it a movie wrapped in a video game? Or does it capture the best of both worlds? As I have been reviewing this game, I have come to realize that I have been describing a video game far more than a film, and that perhaps puts this game's place in perfect perspective. While a valiant attempt has been made to make a truly interactive movie, Heavy Rain is, far more often than not, a video game with movie-like qualities. Those moments where the interactive movie is truly captured comes in starts and stops. As a video game, Heavy Rain is certainly a unique experience and a great deal of fun to play, but I cannot honestly say that I feel the interactive movie has been invented with Heavy Rain. Has this game opened the door for more game developers jumping on the interactive bandwagon? I think not. And while I can't say for sure, my suspicion is that we will certainly see a long line of Halo and Killzone sequels before we ever see a Heavy Rain 2. A shame, as one of the endings left it completely open to a sequel. As this game took a mind-boggling 3 years to complete, one cannot scoff at the effort that has gone into this game. The problem, as I see it, is simply in trying to bite off more than they could chew. Trying to make a good movie requires attention to many specific aspects of that art, while trying to make a good game requires attention to elements tailored to something entirely different. Combining these two elements into a satisfactory product would likely take a village, and it's possible that what we got with Heavy Rain is about the best that we could hope for. The game is good. It's one of my favorite games for the PS3, but as a movie-video game hybrid, it contains the best and worst of both worlds. Sony, Quantic Dream, and writer-director David Cage should be proud of what they have achieved here, but perhaps this would be a good time to quit while they're ahead.